station. You're also watching it. And this is your host, Greg Fenton. Each week, we explore topics and ideas related to the experience of people with conflict and look to promote the profession of conflict resolvers. We are available to connect with at fentonmediation@gmail.com and 647-227-4734. Visit us at our Facebook page to like us and Facebook group page to become a member. Also visit the YouTube channel called Fenton Mediation. Listen to podcasts of Mediation Station on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please follow us at our Twitter account, which is at Fenton Mediation. The conversation today is titled Finding Joy in the Time of COVID. And with me will be, very shortly, Debbie Kassirer. We continue to present the program live each Sunday night from 8 to 9 p.m. through Zoom. We will engage in conversation with everyone attending, able to listen and watch. Microphones and webcams will be closed. If anyone wants to contribute, there are two options. One is to see the chat icon as a bubble at the bottom center of your screen for you to click to then type in a comment or question and then click to send. As being illustrated by Laura in the center with the chat. Thank you, Laura. Or you can click on the reactions icon that is also on the bottom center of your screen for us to see that you want to open your mic and speak. So click on the hand icon within the reactions. We'll open the microphone. You'll speak. We won't open the camera. Nothing personal. And we will provide that you can share your comment or question, and then we'll close your microphone again. The show is being recorded for both video and audio purposes and will be available for public access on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts afterward. One thing to mention, as I've been doing a public service announcement for the last few weeks, there is another option available for individuals looking to become accredited as a family mediator in Ontario. Ontario Association for Family Mediation, OAFM, is now providing that 80 of the 100 hours of practicum experience can be completed using simulated cases. The final 20 hours of the practicum must be completed with real cases and clients. Family Mediation Practicum Ontario is providing, through its OAFM approved course, this experience starting this fall, 2021, by using realistic case scenarios with the 80 hours counting towards accreditation. All classes are online with real-time feedback. For more information, please check out the webpage, familymediationpracticum.pccs.ca. Tonight, we're looking to find some joy, and we've got a conversation titled Finding Joy in the Time of COVID. And with me is Debbie Kassirer. Welcome to the program again. This being your first visit through the Zoom format.
It is.
Yeah, so we can see each other. Well, we can see each other at the radio. And this way, everyone else can see us too.
Absolutely. Nice to be back.
Yeah, you know, it's been a while.
It's been about a year and a half, I think.
Sorry, nothing personal. I've been doing it this way and this format, this delivery through Zoom, with Laura's assistance and also her significant other, Anthony, in terms of assisting me with this since the last week of January this year. You know, the station went into the emergency measures with COVID-19 being in place that really were instituted by the middle of January. And then I didn't do the show at all for 2 weeks, and then Laura had the light bulb moment that she presented to me, and then I clicked the switch and I went with it. And you know, this has been a very comfortable space in many ways to do the conversations that I like to do and have. It adds the element that it also has the visual. At the station, I wanted to do always a visual component to complement the audio. So now I get that, though, you know, it has its points and it has its others. And
No, for sure.
you'll see from the conversation tonight, in fact, too, it also provides for people to be live with us and contributing live time on real time. So why do you keep returning? I'm just going to be blunt with you.
Well, I return for a number of reasons. One is I think it's amazing that you've been running Mediation Station for so long. You're in your 16th or 17th year. And so I think what you do is fantastic, and I want to support you in it. And plus, it's always great to have a chance to connect with you. And being here on the show, I can connect with you. And so that's always wonderful.
Well, yeah, this is the way we can, follow up from what's happened for you or with you over the last periods of time. Yeah. So what's a comment? Can you believe people have listened for so long? You get all kinds in the bleacher seats. I just don't want to put that person's name out there. Oh,
So Greg, is it 16 and a half years? How long have you been running this now?
The first when a show went to air on February 13th, 2005.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like 16 and a half years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recently, in like 2 months ago, I have all the shows. The first show I have saved on cassette. Remember that format?
Oh my God.
So I ended up inputting it into an MP3 recorder, and then I transferred that onto the computer, and then I edited that. So I've edited the first 3 shows and we did it only at the beginning once per month. And good timing. I want to acknowledge a person in the crowd here. Lynn is the one who came up with the name that was announced formally on the 3rd show in April. Do you see that person, Lynn, there? Lynn, you want to wave to everyone? Yeah. So I had a little contest. I was working at a community-based. There we go. There's our hand. Do you want to speak, Lynn? We can open your mic just to. What's best is about to come. Okay. Anyways, we'll work with that. If you want to speak, let us know. I had a contest where I was working community mediation up in Jane and Finch on Eddystone, Conflict Mediation Services of Downsview. And I had a contest with the volunteer pool, the mediators within my program, community transformation program. And I said, hey, doing this program and need a name, need an identity. So worked it out and then identified Lynn's response, Mediation Station. It's just a play on words, a catchphrase in some way, and it's just resonated ever since. So I've been, I'm dedicated to what I do. I'm committed to it. Maybe I should be committed. I'm not sure. That's another conversation on another day. Let's transition this back to you, and you're the focus tonight.
Okay.
Not me. What's your intention when you are seeking to try to work with people?
My intention. I think, I have my own practices called Beyond Conflict, and my focus is on helping workplaces resolve conflict. And most of it is really about repairing relationships. So I think my major intent is giving people space to be heard. So often I hear people say, this is the first time I've actually got to share my side of the story or to be heard. And I think that's a big piece, is to create the space for people to share their stories and to let them know that they're being heard.
Well, you mentioned about create the space. Put that in words. How would you look to create a space?
How would I look? I've never thought of that. I think it's really about being a really good listener and allowing the person, not feeling like I need to fill in the gaps or ask too many questions initially. Just allowing the person to speak and let their story unfold. I think, I've seen situations where people are too, the person that's doing the questions jumps in too quickly, and it's like it becomes frenetic. And I think we often just need to slow down and let the person speak. And it means being okay with, with silences. And so I think that's how I try to create space. And I will actually even, the voice in my head, I will say that, create, leave them space, allow them to tell it in their own time. So I will often coach myself to do that.
So somewhat of a reflective practitioner?
I would say that I like to consider myself a reflective practitioner. And most times I think I am.
Yeah, that's, when I hear the word that you have voices in your head, that's what I connect. We're talking within internally
Yes. Yes.
to connect with the moment, what's happened, and then also connect with what hasn't happened. And then try to figure out within ourselves in relation to another person, what could be best to try to do, especially to assist this person with this situation.
Absolutely.
So prior to the occurrence of COVID, how would you describe yourself in terms of your professional and personal efforts? What was life like for you that way?
Yeah, back then. I think one thing that really characterizes me is I'm an extrovert. And so I really like to be around people. I am energized by being around people. So for instance, professionally, one of the things I do is I facilitate workshops. And sometimes when I would facilitate workshops in person, and when I would feel that I was really on and in the groove, and the audience was really engaged, it was like magic. There'd be this amazing energy exchange. And I would come away from those workshops feeling really high, like just from that it went so well. And during COVID, where I do all this virtually, using Zoom, it's not the same experience. I don't find the same energy exchange. And the same with, on my personal life pre-COVID, I have a wonderful circle of friends who I would get together with. I would go to the theater and music. My husband and I loved to travel. There were lots of things to look forward to and dream about. And so a lot of that got shut down during COVID. So for me, being an extrovert, things changed dramatically during COVID.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say you're an extrovert, which I can appreciate, though I don't connect with per se, because I identify as an introvert. I'm somebody who's really introspective, and just I keep contained that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a protective shell, whatever. I'm a shy person, which is contradictory to here I have a public presence with this program that's been on the air for so long. And it's like, hey, I'm putting myself in a space and place that's so contrary to how I identify.
Yeah, many I think introverts have to do that. They develop a sort of an extroverted persona for their work. Have you ever, it's been around for a while, read Susan Cain's book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Won't Stop Talking?
No.
It's an excellent book. So Susan Cain, Cain, and it's called Quiet. Excellent. It really.
Yeah, Brian, if you know Brian Martin, he was actually with me originally at conflict mediation. He was a staff member, and then he was one of my mediator volunteers. And then, I don't know, he seems to follow me around. He was also a co-host with me. So he's got his own program on Friday nights on the station called Mr. Beast Bounce at 8 o'clock, just to do a little plug for him. And so Brian and I once had a conversation on the program on our public selves and our private selves. The challenges that, we put on this public persona. And then the reality is that we have this private persona, and the two are not necessarily aligned as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And these dynamics that we present for ourselves at the same time in parallel universes, we'll call it.
Yeah, no, I can see that. There was a wonderful example in this book, Quiet, where there was a professor who is very loved, very popular, who's an introvert. And so during breaks, he would hide out in the washroom because he needed just a break from being out there and being extroverted, and he just needed time to recharge his own energy.
Yeah, it's probably some anxiety he was experiencing or feeling from being out in that public on display sort of kind of mindset, thinking, my God, how do I, the comfort level for him was probably raising his level of stress. So he sought some kind of seclusion in a cave type of format where he could reconnect and build his inner strength back up. So how did you try to adjust yourself to the, be positioned as you have been over the past number of months, 15 months maybe, during COVID?
I think part of it wasn't so much by design initially as it was by necessity. So there was a period for a couple of weeks where, my work ground to a halt, and then starting to put stuff online, and 100% of it transitioned to Zoom. I think I just had a couple workshops that were canceled outright because people didn't want to do them virtually. And then in terms of my own personal life and adapting, I think that was just trial and error to see what worked. I quickly tried to, establish connecting with people virtually, through Zoom. Although I must admit, after spending so many hours each day on Zoom, I'm feeling a bit zoomed out. And then trying to be active, go for walks every day and look after myself. But there were ups and downs. Like there were so many layers. I just felt with COVID and so much stuff that was unknown and unfolding all the time, just sort of feeling like a constant level of anxiety, not sure what was going to happen. And I found this actually in all my clients as well. I found that during COVID, most people seem to have this base level of anxiety that was very different than pre-COVID. It was almost like people were vibrating at a higher frequency. And so I found people more reactive, more quick to jump to conclusions. And I saw it in myself as well. So I saw a parallel between what I was going through and what other people were going through as well.
So you had that heightened awareness, that self-awareness that was bringing things of what was happening to you, with you, for you, about you, to try to make sense of. Why is this happening?
Exactly. But and it was all. I think the thing that was hard too is there was so much uncertainty and so much happening that was out of my control, and that for me creates anxiety. And it took me a long while actually, to learn to recognize what I could control and what I couldn't, and to be able to try to let go of what I couldn't control. And I think that's a work in progress. I certainly feel like I've made gains in that area, and it's allowed me to relax more. It's been a journey over the past 16 months, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think many of us, me too, even though I'm a shy person, I'm an introvert. My work prior to COVID is about going out and being in person and doing the connections and building relationships, whether it's teaching or coaching, meeting with clients. And now that we've transitioned from the necessity, the imposition, we'll say, that COVID and the system has said, hey, for your health and well-being, stay home, basically, to preserve yourself and the rest of us in society, so that we don't get sick from each other. So, that's had an impact, as you've mentioned, on our daily lives and our mindsets, our mental health.
Oh, absolutely. And I found I was, lots of times I felt afraid of catching COVID, and just, hear about people that had terrible, who caught it, who had terrible symptoms. I live in a part of Toronto where it's pretty densely populated, so the homes are pretty close together. And my next door neighbor, the wife and her husband and daughter all had COVID. And so people around me, very close to me, were starting to get COVID. And I just found that made me feel really anxious. And so things like that were um, increased my anxiety and my fear of catching COVID.
Yeah, and it sounds like, if I was you, it would like, okay, I'm going to socialize even less. I'm going to go out even less. I'm going to minimize, only going out for food or to the bank or
Yep.
to the doctor if needed. Well, not even to the doctor. For me, I experienced doing a telephone conversation with the doctor. So I didn't even go out for that.
I know, just very, 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 very strange. And it's interesting because I live downtown. A lot of times when I have meetings or something downtown, I would take the subway. And it was so strange. I used the subway for the first time about a week ago. I had not been on the subway for like 16 months. Just all very strange.
Was it busy?
No, not at all. Not at all. There were some people on it. And there was, I actually went on it because I had a doctor's visit, and there was somebody who I think had a mental health issue and was yelling profanities. And so I remember thinking, oh, I don't want to be on the subway, and starting to get a bit aggressive, not with me personally, but there weren't many people on it. Like, it was pretty empty.
Yeah, I was on last week too. I just went out to get some supplies for the office, my little office here. And I found that there's not many people who are using the system yet. Maybe early in the morning when I went was in the mid-afternoon. So I am used to, if I was traveling, especially when I worked downtown too on University Avenue at the court, it would be like packed and we'd be standing up and you'd be like
Oh.
making new friends with people that you didn't expect to make new friends with because of the density of being, pushed into this space. And then on the way
For
home too,
sure.
simultaneously. I remember, waiting at St. Patrick's Station trying to get home. And sometimes the cars on the subway would be so packed, I'd have to wait for like 3 or 4 trains.
I've had that experience for sure.
Now it's like totally different. Nevertheless, the reality is that much of what is happening with COVID is transitioning again to a space and place where we're now going to be more able to go out and socialize and interact. Do you think that's going to impact you and the type of work you do?
It's interesting. I, a lot of my work will be dictated in terms of whether I'm in person or virtual by what the client wants. There were some things actually, like doing mediations virtually, I really like, and I'm hoping moving forward that I can do a hybrid version, that some things in person, some things online. I think that would best suit me to do that. The other thing with COVID is because things were virtual, I was able to take on work in other provinces, in British Columbia and Saskatchewan, which before I would never do because they would always hire somebody who was local. And so I liked that variety, and there were some, different issues that came up. So I'm hoping that works. And it's interesting, because here in Toronto, things for sure are beginning to transition. I mean, our numbers, I've been watching them daily, under 30, cases, 28 or something like that. So it's looking very promising. At the same time, my daughter, with whom I'm very close, lives in Manchester, UK. And the situation there continues to be crazy. I think right now they're having something like 31,000 new COVID cases a day. And it's the Delta Plus, and a Lambda version from South America. And the government's planning to fully open things July 19th, I think the date is. So there'll be no more wearing masks. If you're near someone who's had COVID, you don't have to self-isolate anymore. And I think it's craziness. And I know that the number of deaths has flattened out, but the Prime Minister has said, we just need to learn to live with COVID. And yes, there will be some deaths. And I feel very anxious for my daughter and her partner because they haven't had their second shots yet, and they can't get them any sooner. The government is controlling, when you get it. And right now they're focusing on people that I think are 40 and up. And my daughter and her partner are early 30s, and so they won't get their second shots until things have been fully opened up, which just makes me crazy.
Yeah, and I sense that you're not soon to travel to go see her, especially with the
Yeah, no,
situation as it is.
I know. And with them, I know a number of countries are preventing people from the UK to for planes to come into their country. So I think Portugal and Spain, who are both having their own COVID issues, and I think Hong Kong as well. And so I'm hoping that that changes. My son is getting married in October, and I'm really hoping our daughter can make it to Toronto for the wedding.
Well, one step at a time, hopefully, and work from there.
Absolutely.
Someone from the crowd.
Christiana. Hi, Christiana. Yeah, she's just saying that her daughter and husband live in the UK and she's worried as well. Yeah, so I think you and I can really empathize with one another.
So let's get deeper into our topic. When I say the word joy, what does that mean to you?
For me, joy is like it's a feeling. It's like when I take delight in something, and for me, joy, when I experience it, it's when I truly am in the moment. I'm just present. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not ruminating about the past. I'm just truly in the present. And for me, when I experience joy, it makes me feel hopeful. I like to think of myself as having sort of an inner flame. It's my joie de vivre, if you will. And I think during COVID, my little pilot light has been on low. And when I experience joy, it's a way just to make me feel more full of life. And so the reason I wanted to talk about this topic is when I was feeling, I think of myself as a resilient person. And yet there were times when I felt that I wasn't okay. And so I began to think about what could I do to make myself feel better and to make myself feel more hopeful. And I realized that I wanted to find more ways to experience joy during COVID. And so that's where, I really made a conscious effort to do that.
And that's through your mindset?
For my mental health, for my well-being, for my happiness. Yeah, definitely.
So how do you actually identify the creation of that connection of joy in your life, especially because it's been a lot of our emotions to express external lies, especially in social settings and relationships that are in person, have been marginalized.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it was something I just stumbled across as opposed to be by conscious design. I didn't just sit down one day and say, okay, I got to find more ways to feel joyful. I think what happened was a couple things happened where, again, I was in the moment and I experienced that feeling of joy. And it was like an aha moment, thinking like, yes, I can still, I can be in a time that isn't a particularly positive time for me, meaning COVID, and I can still feel joy and still experience meaning. And I think that happened once or twice. And then I thought, well, let me think about other ways or notice other things that bring me joy. And so much of it, I think, was about slowing down a lot and just noticing things. I think that during COVID, when I would be worried, I would be preoccupied and I would not be present. And I think by allowing myself just to slow down and just be present and notice things, it allowed different joyful moments to surface. Whereas I didn't allow them, I didn't create room for them to surface before, I think.
Maybe it wasn't a considerate. I mean, there's a number of reasons why, we create conditions for ourselves to cope in some way
Yeah.
or adapt. And it's not always the most positive, productive for us. When we I'm sure you know from your experience in your work that when people deal with conflict or they're experiencing it's usually an experience they don't want or like. Yet,
Exactly.
yet they remain within those because someone else will say, "Well, why don't you just do this or that?" And it's easier said than done when you say that to somebody who's living it. And so people find a way to stay within their conflict, their negative conflict, rather than seeking actively to work their way through it and out of it to somewhere that could be much more productive and healthy.
Yeah. It's like, it's sort of to me a little bit like, if you're in a situation and it's so uncomfortable for you, whether it's conflict or anything else, to be able to say, okay, this isn't working for me. I just keep reinforcing it. And what can I do to change things up, to make me look at the situation differently? It's a little bit like out of the box thinking. Like, how can I look at this differently? Can I look at it from a different angle? Can I do something different? How can I shake things up so that I have a different experience? And that's kind of what happened to me, when I would be able to create these, be aware of these joyful moments, was just trying to look at things differently. And I felt it really helped me. I felt it really buoyed my spirits. I felt less gloomy. I felt much more positive, and I felt more energized. So I felt, when you talked about, before being a very social person, because I started to have more energy, I wanted more to reach out to my good friends and do things like that. So it became a positive, it became a positive sort of routine, a positive spiral, if you will, upward.
Or like you mentioned earlier, you fed off the energy that you were
Mhm.
getting, the positivity in some way that it was you were experiencing with another person from that
Exactly.
interaction, and that it fed into you that energy, that positivity.
For sure, for sure. And then because I didn't have the same kind of social interactions, I had to look for other things that would energize me or give me, make me feel hopeful, or make me feel happy. And so for me, being able to find these little moments that brought me delight, were it was just such it was just such a rewarding feeling. And that's something that I want to keep doing. I want to, that's something that even, as the world opens up, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah, I remember you and I had a conversation on a past show on the concept and the like, feeling of dignity. Do you remember that conversation?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, bringing dignity to relationships, and you know maybe a similar thing, having the joy, how that can be magical in ways. We're talking about an ideal, which I understand from your point of view. For those who are experiencing the depths of their mental health experience as a negative, and because COVID is, layered on a lot of that, where people just don't feel in control. I mean, at least you have an opportunity that you've accessed within yourself, a means to create the change you want. And what can you say to people who are going through the depths of mental health concerns and issues that have been exacerbated? They may have existed before, or they
Hmm.
may not have. COVID has whatever impacted people who've never and also have had in the past. And so it compounds things. What would you say to people in that?
Well, I think the first thing I would say, somebody's listening right now who is experiencing that, who's had a really tough time mental health wise, um, and says, boy, Debbie makes it sound like it's so easy. I just want to say from the start that I realized that I was in a very privileged position during COVID. I was living in a house with a yard. I really liked and enjoyed the person that I was bubbled with, my husband. I had work, so I had money coming in. So I didn't have a lot of the pressures and stresses that so many people experience. And I didn't have COVID. So I did have it a lot easier than so many other people. And so I don't mean to make it sound like, it was tough for me in that way. It wasn't. And I really feel for people that did. And I think that for people that did, I mean, my goodness, it added such a struggle and so much stress and so much uncertainty. And I think for people that are really struggling with mental health issues, and I have not had the experience of depression, but I know friends of mine who have. It's so hard for them just to get motivated to do anything. But what I would advise people is, if they are in that kind of situation, is do what they can to get some professional help, to get some support, and to reach out to their own network to get support. I think that is so key, like just to know that you aren't alone, and ideally to have someone to talk about it with. I certainly had it much easier. Yeah, and there were times actually that I felt guilty, that I felt down, because I felt like, what right do I have to feel down when I've got so much going for me during COVID? Yeah.
Relative to some of those people that don't have the same possibilities or opportunities, that they're
For
living
sure.
in these experiences that are, just so layered in many ways, and they don't necessarily see a pathway to getting, as you've found for yourself. Though, I know you're genuine when you talk about being sincere in how you reflect on your privilege, and how that has been a major factor in how you can find joy. And when we espouse for others, they may say nonsense to that. It just does. How that can you find joy in the time of COVID with the complications of mental health? And also, because I'm focused a lot in terms of intimate partner relationships, family mediation stuff too, that because people have been uh, compelled to be in their home space with their partner, and
Mm-hmm.
if that relationship hasn't been as healthy before, or it just created the space within that uh, particular space of home, with the couple being so close in presence and proximity on a continuing basis, abuse and violence in those relationships have been compounded because of COVID.
Huge, huge. And people that, even people that had fairly decent relationships, I think of people living in condos, and some of the condos in Toronto are very small, 600 square feet. And to be spending 724 with your partner in a 600 square foot condo. I mean, none of us was meant to spend 724 with our partners. And so I think, even people that had, okay relationships, it's put real stresses on them because of the way things have been set up. So I think it's, so many different layers, and it's so complicated for people.
Yeah, and with the, as we've referred to, the conditions with COVID and the requirements now easing, we're able to go out and, step 3 or stage 3 as of the 16th of this month, this Friday, is going to
Mm-hmm.
be implemented, and there's going to even less requirements. I think there's going to be a bit of a struggle for people to feel that they can now more freely engage, because maybe in some way they've coped within the space of the confines of their home space and the dynamics that it presents, to now then go out in public,
Oh,
and the implications for all that too.
for sure, for sure. And even people that don't have issues, I've heard friends of mine who are extroverts, because it's been so long since they've been with people, even though they're so glad things are better and they can go out, they feel anxious about it, about suddenly socializing again. And as somebody likened to, it's like a muscle. If you haven't used it for a while, it needs to be worked again. And I've heard a number of people just expressing social anxiety about, now that things are opening up, just like anxious about getting back out there, even though it's something that they want, they're still very nervous about it.
Yeah, I mean, we create the mindset that, hey, this is our ideal. This is where we ultimately want to be at. The thing is that people are in their present, and that might be an uncomfortable space or place for them, especially if it's a relationship that's not very healthy as
Mm-hmm.
intimates, and it's had all these considerations of abuse and control and power dynamics and being marginalized within that space. I'm not sure how the transition to opening up, what's going to happen to those relationships. Are those people going to run to the courts with their relationships falling apart within the space or not? Are they going to remain within the confines of the home because that's their safe space? They've created that as their coping mechanism.
Yeah. Or is one of the partners going to get even more controlling as the world opens up as a way of controlling the partner and trying to restrict
Mhm.
them even further? Yeah. So there's just so many different dynamics that could unfold.
So many unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
We have this idea like, hey, I want to do this, and if we have this consideration that we can just go out and do it, fine. If we're not living the kinds of experiences that others who are being controlled and marginalized and affected by mental health concerns, their pathway is going to be different than our pathway.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
we have to be cognizant of that. And I don't know. The reality of life is what it is in the current moment, and then we deal with it as best we can. Others can deal with it better than others.
Yeah. And just to your point about how different people are experiencing it differently, for those of us that work with people, understanding, being really careful not to make any assumptions that other people's experiences are experience, because it's not. They have very different experiences, and just to really be open to listening to them.
Yeah, that's the trap, that we think, what we feel and what we believe to be the template for others, and
Mm-hmm.
without consideration, and that's lack of self-awareness and reflection, that others are going through their own lived experiences their way. That is a opportunity for a lot of more negativity to happen.
Absolutely. And I think you described it well. I think it is a trap, and so one has to be very careful not to fall into it.
Yeah, I also believe, though, we need to talk about these things because we have to provoke. I'm about social change. It's about provoking from the status quo what we seem to be believing to be the truth and the reality, because we only consider our own lived experiences as being the whole truth, the whole reality of life, when we're a small component of the total, to its totality. And society is much more sophisticated than what we might be feeling or living in the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
So, why is talking about bringing joy into your life, especially during this time of COVID, something that you wanted to really, explore, express, and present as an opportunity?
I think because, again, what worked for me may not work for other people. I definitely recognize that. I think because having recognizing these joyful moments did help me, did help my mental health and help me feel happier, and that I thought that I wanted to share it for those people that might find the same thing as well. And it was all, as I mentioned, it was all about really slowing down and being present in the moment, and allowing and it's like you can't force a moment of joy. It just it happens or it doesn't happen. But to be open, making it being present so that it allows it to come up if it's meant to come up. So as an example, just being more slowing down at the end of the day and watching a beautiful sunset.
When you say slowing down, what do you mean by that?
So, okay, slowing down. I am that's a good question. I can be a hyper person, like doing a lot of things and running around, and I'm not, when I do that, I'm not still, and I don't sit still, literally, and I don't allow things just to be aware of what's stop and just noticing what's around me. I'm too busy doing, I think is what I'm saying. And so this is more about just being. And I would allow myself to slow down and just be. And so the example I just gave a moment ago was just, watching a beautiful sunset at the end of the day, which would give me tremendous pleasure. Or first thing in the morning, when I would have my morning coffee and I'd look out at the house behind me, I loved the morning sunlight, how it played against my neighbor's house, and just seeing things like that brought me joy. Or even just a very silly example is I take great pleasure in my cup of coffee in the morning that I have in my favorite mug with froth milk, and it just makes me feel good. And little things like that. And I would sometimes buy myself fresh flowers. And this was when you couldn't actually go into the stores. You had to stand at the door and they would give them to you. So flowers give me pleasure. And they also remind me of my mom, who has passed away. She was an avid gardener, and she always had flowers in her home. And so when I do things like that, it reminds me of my mom, and I take great pleasure of it, and it makes me happy. And so things like that. And the other thing that actually that I realized is one of the things that makes me feel good is when I can do things for other people or help other people out. It's been something that's been important to me always, but even more so, I think, during COVID. And so I've really tried to do things like that with my neighbors, or helping, elderly neighbors out. One thing that we did that was really fun was I'm very involved with the musical stage company, which does musicals. And last year they had something called Porchside Songs. And so we hired a couple to do a concert on our front porch. It was a 45 minutes a set. And it was when you're only allowed 10 people on your property, and that included the 2 musicians and the stage manager. So basically 7 people on my property, but we let all of our adjoining neighbors know. And so when the concert was going on, we had people on the street, we had people across the street. It was amazing. It was truly joyful. And our neighbors, you would have thought we did something amazing. Like, people were just so grateful to see a live concert. And so things like that it was just so much, it was just so much fun. And so things like that. So that wasn't necessarily helping other people out with an errand or getting food or whatever, but I think it just helped people out with their, feeling, experiencing joy, or doing something that they would normally do when it wasn't COVID, like seeing a live music concert.
And I would say it's like doing opposites at the same time. It's helping people to disconnect from the tension, the anxiety of the COVID and its reality, to help them connect with something that could give them this sense of, feeling inside, this positivity, this joy.
Yeah. Actually, you explained it really well. Yeah, it is about that. It's sort of disconnecting from your worries or your concerns, and then just connecting to something that is very enjoyable. And it's interesting when you can disconnect from your worries and just be in the present and moment and enjoy something. I feel like it's just very freeing, and it takes some of the tension out. It's like, in a hot air balloon, letting a little bit of the air out, letting a little bit of the worry out. And so I think, things like that really, really do that. And I like the way you described it about, disconnecting from your concerns about COVID or other things, and just being able to focus on something that you really enjoy.
Yeah, and you value, and that you see brings, that value to you. And also, it's about those memories too. Like, you talk about your mother and the flowers, and how that's something that was of value to her, and thus you value your mother, you value things connected to your mother, and that brings you that internal, that joy.
Yeah.
We have a question. How do you reach a balance, the focus between the well-being of others and that of our own individual well-being? So, for example, others jump to the conclusion that I'm ignoring their needs and conceded when I took off my mask just for a few minutes due to breathing issue and excessive heat, and they're like 5 meters away. So how would you find a way to balance your needs and other people's needs? And going through these things in a parallel universe type thing.
I think, if you think of the example of that they always give on planes, that put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you do it to your child or someone that, depends on you. I think we do need to look after, our own needs and be cognizant of other people's. And in that example that, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the person who gave it, but in that the example you gave, I think part of it is communicating it, that it's tough if you can't breathe, or if you were, if it was too much and it was making you not feel well. I would just let people know, because I think people had the experience, I certainly did, when I was shopping in a no frills, and a woman came in and didn't have a mask, and it would have been helpful to know that she had some kind of medical reason why not. And what happened was the woman just got ramped up and started yelling at everybody. And so that wasn't helpful. And so I think, I think most people are understanding. And if you just, if you got looks when you took your mask off or other things, just to be able to explain to people, I just need to do this for a minute. I think, you explained that you were distanced from them, and just say, I need to do this. I'm, it's too much. I'm feeling faint, or just, because I think when we communicate and help people understand that we're rational and we're doing it for a rational reason, I think most people do understand. I think it's when people don't know and when you don't communicate that people create their own narrative about it. There's somebody who's just not willing to wear a mask, or that kind of thing.
We make an assumption. We impose a judgment on the person and the situation. The truth is only from our own perspective. We don't provide that space for that person who's, taking off their mask so what's going on for you? Is there something I can do for you? Is something I can help to support you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also, I go back to the point that I mentioned before, that I think during COVID, I think so many people had a base level of anxiety. And so when you add on that, not knowing the complete story, you make up your own narrative about it, and it often has a negative interpretation. And so that's why the communication part of it, I think, is so important.
Yeah, and it's, the narrative is only from one's perspective, one's point of view, self. And I talk about self-awareness a lot, and I do say it has to start with self, and we have to be selfish as a starting point. So I use the word starting point. That's not the intention or the goal. It's to then start with self, to then intentionally look to transcend or build a connection and relate with another.
Yes.
And so being able to create that template of strong self, I think, is fundamental to being in a healthy relationship with another person. If we walked in this world in isolation, just living alone amongst people, I don't know how healthy we might feel, and productive, and whatever. It's just problematic overall from my experience working with people who go through a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Well, and I think when we look after our own needs in a healthy way, not in, it's, you describe it as being selfish, and it may be, but I think it's a positive way. I think when we look after our own needs, I think we respond in a much healthier way to others, because many of our needs are being met by ourselves. And so we don't feel as resentful to other people. I just think it's, as you said, I think it's just a much healthier base from which to have relationships. And I think that is important. I think when people have that as a starting point, I think then it's easier to build healthy relationships with others.
Yeah, and I think we sacrifice too much of our own to accommodate or give in to others.
To be liked. Yeah, or to be liked. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and I teach at U of T, and we have the Thomas Kilmann instrument, conflict mode instrument, which is about 5 personality bases, and accommodation. Yeah, right. And so one of those things is the accommodation thing. We think it's a good thing when we give up, Well, if we don't get something in return or have something fulfilled from that interaction and that relationship, it's really not necessarily about accommodating. It's really about sacrificing. I would put it to that extent. The person who asked the question earlier, her name is Miranda. Miranda, did you have anything further that was something that we said helpful in any way? Let us know. Do a chat. Send a message. I want to acknowledge. All good. Okay. She said thank you.
Okay.
Also, Christiana was saying to you, I do agree with you, Debbie. It is only polite to do so. Consideration. I think there's these two concepts of acknowledgement and agreement. And when we see that we can present value, that we have a way to contribute to another person's value when we acknowledge them, it's not necessarily that we're agreeing with them. I don't equate acknowledgement with agreement. It's about the empathy that you're trying to create that space of connection, that you care.
Yeah.
And you want to care, and it means something. You value that.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was just listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about empathy and compassion. And I was trying to get my head around what are the differences. And the person defined compassion as empathy in action. So you feel empathy towards someone, and when you're compassionate, you are, through your actions, you are demonstrating your empathy.
Yeah, there's what I present in the course too, the continuum of there's the pity, there's the sympathy, there's the empathy, and there's the compassion. The pity is like, oh, poor you. The sympathy is like, I'm sorry. The empathy is, I feel for you in some way. The compassion is, what can I do for you?
Mm-hmm.
It's the active sense of acknowledgement and wanting to contribute in an active way to do something for and with that person that's based on their needs and interests.
Yeah, makes sense.
Though of course we get rewarded for that, because it feeds our own sense and our own interest to do that rewarding.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting continue and describe it, but I agree with how you described it.
So anybody else in the crowd want to do a little more provoking us here in a good way? See what we can deal with. Okay, so we have a comment. This lady you might know, her name is Lynn.
It rings a bell.
Rings a bell. I also think it's very difficult to, quote, read intentions and emotions from behind a mask. And more generally, and as importantly on emails, it's so difficult to put, quote, a smile in our voice using email so that a true intention is received. And if I could add, processed and made sense of as to the intention of the message.
Absolutely. Well, and the reality is people's intentions anyways are invisible. You don't know, I mean, you can't know what they are unless people actually let you know. But you're absolutely right that during COVID, when people had masks on and you couldn't read what was going on, there were a couple situations where I'd be in public because I was shopping for food down on Bloor Street in some of these little stores, and something would happen, somebody would bump up against somebody, and you couldn't see their facial expression to know that they were when they didn't say anything, that they were sorry or it was an accident. And again, Craig, and again, you could come up with all sorts of interpretations. So it was very hard. And I really feel for little children, babies who learn so much from looking at people's facial expressions. And they've grown up the past year looking at people in masks and not being able to see facial expressions aside from their own family at home. And I think, like, you wonder, what these kids are missing out on because they didn't have that. So I think that's been a huge thing in terms of not being able to, fully understand as much as we could because you can't see.
Yeah, and Miranda adds here, in the extreme, when dealing with abuse and protecting oneself, what measures must be done to remain calm, self-preserving, etc.?
I'm not, Greg, you're probably more familiar. I'm not an expert on, abusive relationships or things like that. So I really feel that I don't feel qualified to comment on that. So Greg, can I let you answer that?
Nice deferral. Appreciate it. At the same time, Miranda, I totally understand in some way where you're coming from, though I don't take responsibility for your lived experiences and your feelings and your interest and need to get some clarity with regard to this in the sense of one's joy. Maybe that helps you clarify that. So let's read it in full. In the extreme, when dealing with abuse and protecting oneself, what measures must be done to remain calm, self-preserving, in the sense of one's joy? I'll complement those words. Is there something you could add with that, Debbie?
I'm just thinking here for a moment. So when dealing with abuse and protecting yourself, what measures must be done to remain calm, self-preserving? Again, Miranda, because I'm not an expert on abuse and things like that, as I'm thinking about it, it seems to me that when you're thinking of just protecting yourself so that you aren't hurt or removing yourself from a situation, to me, I would seem like joy would seem very far away in that, because it's about, to me, about survival. Do you want to add a little bit more so I more fully understand?
I think too, part of it is that when people are being abused, they take in some way responsibility that they are responsible for being abused, and the abuser has, they're justified in abusing. That at the same time, we really want people to acknowledge that they have nothing to do with the other person abusing them. That's the other person, and it's really important for people to have the sense of worth for themselves and keep that sense of worth and value. So, when you're going through these struggles and you question the dynamic of the behavior of this other person that's controlling you and undermining you and marginalizing you, gaslighting.
And gaslighting you.
We're on the same page there. Gaslighting, yeah. So we have to find some solace, some place within that we can try to make sense of these unhealthy lived experiences that can have profound impact on us. We talk about trauma. You can have trauma and many dynamics of lived experience. And as a professional, when you're working with people who are going through these struggles, they talk about their effects on them. And, sometimes it goes to the depths of being traumatic. So then, as a third person in the room or professional, we talk about vicarious trauma, how that may impact us as the professional in the room and that space, and facilitating some kind of process that may, provoke something that's from our own past and cause us some grief to come more to the surface when we've kept that suppressed and repressed over time, and we thought in a healthy way, and it just comes to the surface. So I think it's important that, joy, your intention is that, hey, it's an opportunity to get people to think of their situations in a different light, more positive, hopeful light, especially with this whole cloud of COVID over us.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that was my desire in talking about that, looking at that each of us has the ability to find the little gems in our life to give us, it's like, cracks, letting the light in, that we can, try to find our own ways of letting the light in and giving us hope, or looking at a difficult situation in a different way.
And Miranda adds, I see, thank you for clearing this up. So, using the whole symbolism of the clouds and the clearing and connecting that with opportunity and positivity and healthy things, all of these things take time. And, when we talk about it, it may be simple for us to say, conceptually, we have to incorporate that into our mindset to make sense of it. And, when I've asked you a couple of times, what do you mean by that? And how do you actually do that? Because we talk the what, let's do this, It's really more for me about the how. Okay, it's easy to say it. To do it is another thing. How do you,
Absolutely.
how
Yeah.
do you
And
go ahead?
I was going to say, and when you said about even saying it is easier than doing it, when you would ask me sort of what do you mean by that, it's also we use language differently. And so I might say something and it may mean something to me, and you may have a different understanding. So you seek clarification so that you can understand exactly what it is. This is just about explaining it, not the doing. But I think that's an important step in just in terms of understanding what somebody's trying to say, that they may use language in one way that doesn't resonate for the other person. And it's important to get clarification in order to truly get that understanding. And you know, you do that well.
Well, it's about, what I hear, for example, and then I take the same words that I've heard and I present that back. So you've just said this. I don't put my words or my spin on it. You have ownership of the words. And that's what I want to base my new understanding from you being presented with that. So you just
Yeah.
shared about this using your words. How with the transition with COVID and all these things and how you've coped and dealt with things and incorporated this sense of connecting with joy, what will you take to create a legacy, hopefully, that it will be more foundational as clear up into the horizon with the COVID in the past?
Well, two things. One is, I mean, I think the underpinning of it is self-compassion. And so carrying through self-compassion. So no matter what, being kinder, continue to work at being kind to myself and forgiving towards myself. And then around the related specifically to joy, I think what I want to carry forward moving forward is to not be so busy all the time doing and feeling like I have to achieve and do things and check things off my to-do list. I'm a big list maker, and I get great satisfaction when I check things off. But it's not all about that. And to make sure that I leave time for moments where I'm just being, I'm not doing. And because that's when things come up for me, and where I can just truly feel in the moment and disengage from, Greg, when you said disconnected from any negative things going on in my life. And it's in those moments that I'm aware that those moments of joy just come up. I can't create them, they just pop up. And so they're wonderful, and I take delight in them. And so I want to make sure that I leave space for those moments. So those are a couple of the things that, coming out of COVID, that I want to make sure that I retain. And I think I gained both of those through COVID. I always had some self-compassion, but I realize how important it is, and I want to do it even more so.
Fundamentally, absolutely. So what suggestions can you propose for people who are currently experiencing the challenges with how much COVID and its impact on especially their mental health and mindset has been? What can you suggest?
I think there are a number of things. I mean, I think, and what worked for me isn't necessarily going to work for someone else. So it's really finding what works for you. And I think an important thing, I think that's the tip I mentioned about slowing down, so that you get in touch with what works for you and what's important to you. I think that's important. I think that, depending on the degree of your suffering from mental health issues, that you may want to get some professional support for it, just to help you reach out to other people. And so there are just so many different layers here. But ultimately, I think in terms of, if we're talking about how you can find joy, and I think that it's you need to find what works for you. And so what worked for me, Debbie, may not work for you. But I think it's important to find that for yourself, because I think that, for most people, when you can find moments of joy, it gives you great pleasure, it makes you feel hopeful, and it does help one's mental health.
And that's exactly, about having options. And that's why I framed it to you as, what do you propose, rather than what do you tell people? When you tell people, it's coming from the mindset and the point of view of you, and it's about only you and the consideration of you. When you propose, it's like options, it's possibilities. And then people have, for their own self-determination, their own power, to decide what and if and how as to any of those possibilities or options.
Absolutely. And I love just even your term possibilities, because when you know possibilities, it's like they're possibilities. There may be something in there that works for me, not, you know, the person saying that. And to me, when they're possibilities, there's hope, because it means that there's still something else you could try.
Yeah. It's not an endpoint. It's a goal. It's an intention. There's purpose there. And I think life is a continuum, and it's a journey. Anybody have anything as we are looking to, well, we have to, you know, end the show, the conversation. Anything
it went by really quickly. Wow.
I want to ask you, did you have some joy from this conversation?
I do. Whenever I get together with you, Greg, it's always a joyful experience.
You flatter me. You flatter me. I appreciate very much. I value our conversations and our time together, and the conversations we do. And let me say two things. Wonderful discussion. Thank you both. And from another person, wise words from both of you to all of us. Be good to ourselves and spread that joy to others. Yes, start with self. Be somewhat, you know, we connote or identify selfishness as being a negative. I think it's a positive, as long as it also transitions to bridge and connect with another. So I guess that's pretty well our evening. Do you have any things you want to share as an endpoint for yourself?
No, this has been fun. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great to be a visitor back again, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we'll look to get the video version of this out. You know, I'm not putting pressure on my team here. Nevertheless, people want to access all the shows, the videos since the last week of January. It's on Fenton Mediation, and it just brings another ability to connect and work with it. Shh, okay, no pressure. Okay, yeah, you in the crowd. All right. Have a good night. Thank you. Also, wonderful show. Have a great night. So everyone, we'll see you next week. You want to visit? We welcome you. Another conversation. And have a good night, good week. Be safe, be well, and have some joy. Find some time for joy. Bring joy to yourself. Okay? So Laura, do your thing.